What if the most dangerous mother in the Siberian wilderness showed up at your doorstep, not to kill you, but to plead with you, in a place so cold that the air feels like broken glass in your lungs? One wrong decision can end a life in seconds. And on one storm-driven night, an old man would have to choose between fear and mercy while standing face to face with a creature built to crush him. His name was Mikhail, though no one called it anymore. Out here, names faded faster than footprints. He lived alone in a small log cabin tucked into the taiga, where dark pines stood like silent witnesses and snow covered everything in a thick, endless sheet. Winter in Siberia was not just a season, it was a test. Some nights fell to minus 95 degrees Celsius, the kind of cold that stole warmth from wood, metal, and even hope. Mikhail had learned to survive by routine. He woke before light, fed the stove, and listened. He listened for the snapping of branches, for the distant chorus of wolves, for the wind changing its tone. He cut firewood until his shoulders burned, then carried it inside like it was treasure. He ate simply. He spoke to no one. Sometimes he muttered at his own hands, as if they were lazy workers he had hired by mistake. That evening, the storm arrived like an angry animal. Snow battered the windows. Wind shoved the cabin walls. The forest disappeared behind a white curtain, and the world shrank to firelight and creaking logs. Mikhail told himself the night would pass like all the others. Then the porch made a sound. Not a creak, not a tap. A heavy, deliberate thump right outside his door. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. Mikhail froze with a spoon halfway to his mouth. The stew smelled of smoke and salt. But suddenly, he could taste nothing. Another sound followed, low and close, like something shifting its weight on the boards. The porch was small. If something big stood there, it was almost touching the door. His mind leapt to wolves first. Wolves tested cabins in hard winters. They circled, they listened, they searched for weakness. But this did not sound like a pack. This sounded like one body, massive and patient, the kind of presence that did not need friends to feel powerful. Mikhail reached for his lantern. The flame inside danced wildly, as if it already sensed danger. He also reached for his old axe, more out of habit than confidence. An axe was comfort. It was not a guarantee. Against a hungry predator, it was often just a way to die with something in your hands. He moved slowly across the cabin, careful not to trip on the uneven floorboards. The wind outside howled and fell, silent in waves, like breath. He leaned close to the door and listened. There was a faint scraping, then nothing. His heartbeat felt too loud. His skin prickled under his wool shirt. He imagined yellow eyes in the dark, steam rising from open mouths, teeth slick with hunger. He imagined claws hooking the doorframe. He imagined his cabin breaking like a toy. Still, there was only one way to know. Mikhail lifted the lantern, set his jaw, and slid the latch free. He opened the door just a few inches, enough for cold air to knife into the cabin and steal the fire's warmth in one gulp. Snow swirled in the lantern light. Then the shape stepped forward, and Mikhail's blood turned to ice for a different reason. The porch was filled by a mother bear. She stood so close that Mikhail could see frost clinging to her fur and ice hanging from the ends of her whiskers. Her shoulders rose like hills beneath a coat of snow. Her breath came out slow and steady, a thick cloud that curled into the storm. She was enormous, and she belonged to this land in a way Mikhail never could. Every story he had ever heard about bears rushed into his head at once. A mother bear was not a simple danger. She was a storm with teeth, especially if a cub was near. One wrong move, and she would not hesitate, not to warn, not to threaten. She would simply end him. Mikhail tightened his grip on the lantern, then realized how useless that light was against her power. He did not step forward. He did not step back. He stayed exactly where he was, trapped in the doorway like a nail hammered into wood. The bear did not charge. She did not roar. She lowered her head slightly, then moved one massive paw with surprising care. It was not a swipe. It was a push, gentle, controlled. A small bundle slid forward from behind her shadow. A cub, tiny, trembling. Its fur was clumped and wet with snow, and its legs looked too thin to hold it. It made a sound that barely reached Mikhail's ears, a weak little cry that seemed to vanish in the wind. The cub's nose was pale with frost. Its eyes were half closed. Its whole body shook as if the cold had climbed inside it and was rattling its bones. It looked like it had fallen asleep on the edge of death. Mikhail's fear did not disappear, but something else rose beside it. The mother bear stared at him, not like a hunter, like a desperate mother with nothing left to try. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. Mikhail's mind tried to reject what he was seeing. Bears did not ask humans for help. Bears avoided humans. Bears feared nothing but hunger and pain. Yet the cub lay at his doorstep like an offering, like a final request. The storm slammed snow into the porch roof. Wind curled around the cabin corners and whistled through cracks in the logs. The mother bear stood unmoving, as if she had decided this was the only place the cub might live. Her eyes stayed on Mikhail's face, dark and unblinking. Inside the cabin, the fire popped and shifted, warm and alive. Outside, the cub's shivering slowed, not because it was getting better, but because it was losing strength. Mikhail had seen that before. In men, the quiet moment when the body gives up the fight. He knew what came next. Stillness, silence, then nothing. He thought of his own hands on winter mornings, stiff and aching until he warmed them near the stove. He thought of his own lungs, how the cold sometimes made him cough until his ribs hurt. He thought briefly and strangely of his mother long ago, tucking a scarf around his neck and scolding him for forgetting gloves. Then he looked back at the mother bear. There was no anger in her posture, no forward lean, no bared teeth, only tension. The kind that said, "I can kill you, but I'm choosing not to." Mikhail's throat felt dry. His tongue stuck to his teeth. He lowered the axe head slightly, as if he was admitting the truth that it would not save him. He raised his empty hand a little, palm open, and forced his shoulders to relax. The bear watched. The cub made another faint sound like a sigh. Mikhail understood the cruel math of the night. If he did nothing, the cub died. If he tried to help, he might die too. And if he died out here, no one would find him until spring, if ever. The wind shoved at his back like it wanted him to choose quickly. Mikhail moved like a man walking across thin ice. Slow, silent, honest. He set the lantern down inside the doorway so its light spilled onto the porch boards. Then he stepped forward with both hands visible, fingers spread. The mother bear did not retreat, but her muscles tightened under her fur. Mikhail could feel the power in her without her moving a single inch. The cub lay on its side, too tired to lift its head. From the cub's world, everything was pain and cold. The snow stung like needles. The wind sounded like a giant angry voice. The warmth inside the cabin was a smell it could barely understand, something impossible and far away. Mikhail crouched. His knees complained. His back pulled tight. He reached toward the cub, and for a moment, his hand hovered, suspended between living and dying. The mother bear huffed once. A low sound, not a growl, but a warning, written in breath. Mikhail froze. He looked up at her eyes, and he saw something that made his chest hurt. She was not calm. She was controlling panic. She was holding herself back with everything she had. Mikhail swallowed and continued. He slid his hands under the cub's body and lifted carefully. The cub was shockingly light, like a bundle of damp cloth. Its tiny heart beat fast, then slowed, then fast again. It pressed weakly against his chest, and its fur felt like ice. The mother bear stepped forward one pace. Mikhail did not run. He did not flinch. He turned, carrying the cub inside, and left the door open just enough to show he was not trapping them. Cold flooded the cabin like an enemy, but Mikhail ignored it. He wrapped the cub in blankets and brought it near the fire, and outside, the mother bear stayed on the porch, guarding the door all night long. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. Mikhail worked with the quiet focus of a man doing surgery with bare hands. He did not place the cub too close to the fire. He knew sudden heat could harm a body already failing. Instead, he created a gentle circle of warmth. Blankets first, then his own thick coat over the blankets, then a careful rub along the cub's paws, slow and rhythmic, like he was trying to convince blood to return. The cub's breathing was shallow. Its chest fluttered as if it could not decide whether to keep going. Its ears were pinned back. Its mouth opened once, making a sound that was more air than voice. From the cub's senses, the cabin was a strange cave of smoke and heat. The fire crackled like a creature. The smell of wood and stew wrapped around it, confusing but comforting. The floor beneath it was hard but not frozen. That alone felt like a miracle. Mikhail whispered without realizing it. Not words meant to be understood. Just sounds, steady and calm. The way people talk to frightened animals and frightened children. He told himself he was doing it for the cub, but part of him knew he was doing it for himself too. He glanced to the window. The mother bear was still there, snow piled on her back, softening her shape. The storm pushed at her fur, but she stood like a monument. She could have left. She could have dragged the cub away. She did neither. She waited. Hours passed. The cub's shiver returned, then eased. Its paws twitched. Its nose moved. A thin, warm breath came out. Then another. Mikhail felt his shoulders loosen by a hair. He fed the fire again, hands shaking as he added wood. He imagined what the mother bear must be thinking. If she was thinking, or if she was simply hoping. The night outside was still alive with wind, and Mikhail realized dawn was not guaranteed for either of them. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. Near the deepest part of the night, when even the wind sounded tired, Mikhail sat on the floor beside the cub and let his head rest against the wall. His eyelids drooped, but he fought sleep. Sleep could make him careless. Carelessness could get him killed. The cub stirred again, stronger this time. Its tiny claws flexed against the blanket. Its head lifted for a second, then fell back. Mikhail allowed himself a small shaky smile. He leaned in and listened. The cub's breathing had found a rhythm. In the cabin, the fire cast orange shadows that crawled along the logs. The air smelled of smoke, wool, and something wild. Mikhail's hands ached from rubbing warmth into frozen limbs, but he kept going. He remembered old tricks from soldiers and hunters, ways to revive a body on the edge. Slow heat, gentle motion, patience. Outside, a heavy scrape sounded against the porch boards. Mikhail's spine stiffened. He looked to the window and saw the mother bear shifting her position. She stepped closer to the door, as if she had sensed the change inside. Her head lowered and her nose pointed toward the crack beneath the door, drawing in scents. Mikhail's breath caught. What if this was the moment she stopped waiting? What if her patience ended the second she smelled her cub warming up? He stood quietly, keeping his movements small. He approached the door and placed his palm against the wood. The cold burned through it. He could feel the bear's presence on the other side, close enough that one shove could break the door in. The cub let out a soft sound, almost like a question. Mikhail looked back at the fire, then at the door. He realized something terrifying. He had invited the wild into his home, and the wild was still deciding what that meant. Morning arrived in slow, pale pieces. The storm eased into gentle snowfall, and a thin gray light seeped through the cabin window. Mikhail's eyes felt gritty from staying awake, but his body moved with new urgency. If he waited too long, the mother bear might decide for him. The cub was alive now. Weak, yes, but alive. Its eyes opened fully for the first time, dark and glossy, reflecting firelight. It made a small sound and pushed its nose into the blanket as if searching for something familiar. Hunger, fear, and instinct mixed inside it, urging it toward the only safety it had ever known. Mikhail nodded to himself as if taking orders. He wrapped the cub again, tighter this time, and approached the door. Outside, the mother bear was still there. She looked like a statue carved from winter. Snow packed on her fur, frost decorating her face. But her eyes were sharp, awake, waiting. Mikhail opened the door carefully, just enough to let cold air spill in. The bear lifted her head. Her body tensed, ready to explode forward if needed. Mikhail stepped back, giving space, and set the cub down on the threshold. He did it gently, like placing a fragile cup on a table. The cub's paws touched the cold boards, and it squeaked, startled, then paused. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the mother bear took one slow step forward, nose reaching out. She sniffed the cub, then nudged it softly with her snout. The cub responded instantly, pressing toward her warmth. Mikhail held his breath, waiting for teeth. But what came next was something else entirely. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. The mother bear gathered her cub with a tenderness that did not match her size. She slid a paw around it like a wall, pulling it close to her chest. The cub squealed once, then settled, its small body melting into her fur, as if it had finally remembered how to be safe. Mikhail stood very still. His hands were open at his sides. He could feel the cold biting his cheeks, but he barely noticed. He watched the mother bear's face, expecting the sudden change, the snap of instinct that would turn gratitude into violence. Instead, she lifted her head and looked directly at him. In that gaze, there was no friendliness, not in the human sense. There was caution, there was power, but there was also something that felt like recognition, like she understood that his hands had held her baby and chosen not to harm it. The bear took one step back. Cub held tight. Snow crunched under her weight. She paused again, as if considering the cabin, the man, the strange warmth that had saved life for a few hours. Mikhail's chest rose and fell slowly. He did not speak. Words felt too small. Then the mother bear turned. She moved off the porch and into the trees with steady confidence, the cub tucked against her. Her footprints marked the snow like a story written in heavy ink. Within seconds, the forest swallowed her dark shape, and the pines closed like a curtain. Mikhail remained on the porch, staring into the white space where she had vanished. The morning was quiet, so quiet it felt unreal. Only his own breathing and the faint hiss of snow falling from branches. He went back inside and shut the door. The cabin felt emptier than before, because now he knew the wild could ask for help, and he knew he could answer. But the real betrayal was still sharpening its dagger. Mikhail sat beside the fire for a long time without moving. The stew had gone cold. The cabin smelled of smoke and damp wool, but also of something else now. A faint, wild scent that clung to the air like a memory. He kept seeing the mother bear's eyes, the way they had held him in place, the way they had not changed when he carried the cub inside. He told himself it was simple. A desperate animal took a risk. A desperate man took a risk back. The story should end there. But his hands would not stop trembling. Not from fear anymore. From the weight of what had happened. He had lived alone for years, believing survival was only about toughness, suspicion, and refusing weakness. Out here, mercy sounded like a mistake. Mercy sounded like dying with a warm heart and a cold body. Yet he was still alive. And the cub was alive. Mikhail stared at the door, half expecting it to open again. Not because the bear would return, but because the night had cracked something in the world. Like the rules had bent, and he did not know if they would snap back. He stood and added wood to the fire, feeding it until the flames rose and steadied. He looked out the window. The snow had softened the world. The storm's violence was gone, leaving only a bright, dangerous calm. He thought about the cub's tiny heartbeat under his palms. He thought about the mother bear holding her panic in check for hours on his porch. He wondered how long she had been searching before she found him, and what had made her choose him instead of the endless forest. Then a cold thought slid into his mind, sharp and unwelcome. If a mother bear could make a choice like that, what else in the wilderness could make choices too? And what else might be watching, learning, waiting? Days passed, and the tracks on the porch disappeared under fresh snow. The forest returned to its normal silence, but Mikhail did not. He still chopped wood, still fed the stove, still listened for wolves. Yet something in his listening had changed. He no longer heard only threats. He heard stories. He heard lives moving through the trees, each one fighting its own winter. Sometimes at night, he would wake and think he heard a soft shuffle outside. His heart would jump, and he would sit up, staring at the door, waiting for that impossible moment to repeat. But the porch stayed empty. Only wind, only snow, and that was fine. The point was not that the bear returned. The point was that, for one night, the wall between human and wild had thinned. Not because the wild became gentle, but because desperation can create strange bridges. A mother can do things that logic cannot explain. A lonely old man can find courage in places he forgot existed. Mikhail began leaving small scraps of food farther from his cabin. Not as an invitation, but as a quiet apology to the land for taking so much from it. He repaired the porch boards where the bear's weight had cracked them, and he noticed, with a strange smile, that his hands did not feel quite as old as they used to. He never told anyone the story. There was no one to tell, and maybe the story was not meant to be spoken aloud. Maybe it was meant to sit inside him like a warm coal, glowing through the cold months. So, tonight, as your world gets quiet and your eyes grow heavy, let me leave you with 3 questions to carry into your sleep. If fear knocked on your door, would you answer it with violence or with care? If a stranger from another world asked for help, would you risk your safety to save a life? And if the coldest place on earth can hold a moment of mercy, what does that say about the warmth still possible in us? Good night, and sleep well, in a soft whisper, like falling snow.